A Quirkless Guide to Winning the UA Sports Festival. Written by Leahistyping. Chapter 6. Shit talking is the best kind of talking. Round 2. Match 1. Momo Yaoyorozu vs Izuku Midoriya. Match 2. Shoto Todoroki vs Tenya Iida. Match 3. Katsuki Bakugo vs Mina Ashido. Match 4. Ibara Shiozaki vs Hitoshi Shinso. If there was one thing Izuku Midoriya wanted to learn in his life, it was to rely on fewer people for his successes. Which was ironic, right? He lives by himself, pays his own bills, and picks up any side job he can get his calloused hands on. He excels in every single one of his classes, even if it feels like too much to handle. He's a goddamn vigilante, for Christ's sake. He is the epitome of self-sufficiency and survival, a damn legend in the streets. Yet, somehow, some way, his plans always fall to the mercy of his peers. Obstacle race. He relied on the people around him to show off their quirks. Hell, even Todoroki managed to help him get to the finish line. The cavalry battle. His team barely did anything the whole time. They sat there with a cowardly plan that he came up with and relied on the other participants to hash it out. He waited for Todoroki and Kachan to make a move just so he could swoop in and steal their glory. And now, with Izuku being in the finals, he's doing it again. If he hadn't been able to push Shinso as far as he did in the festival, he probably would have been far more upset with himself. But his plans, though exceptional, made him doubt his overall abilities. He's only been using people this whole time to get where he is. How heroic is that? Was it truly the path he wanted to take? God damn it, Izuku! Focus! Now's not the time to second guess the victory so far. Wait until after the festival. After all, he was sure that Yaoyorozu was in the same boat as him, given the state of mind she seemed to be in the last time they interacted. Though he didn't feel particularly great about benefiting from the suffering of others, he knew that with the low self-esteem that Class A seemed to have plenty of, it would be logical to target it if he wanted any chance of winning. Damn morals getting in the way! He stood in front of Yaoyorozu, fighting stance as confident as ever. He used the remaining 30 seconds before the match to contemplate his current dilemma. The only way he would win against someone with a quirk like this is if he was able to get in their head, overwhelm them, and go in for the kill. But Yaoyorozu seemed so upset already, he would surely only make it worse. But don't they say that one should be struck down before getting built back up? Crap! There were too many options to choose from. He wasn't sure where this wave of second-guessing came from, as not only 5 minutes ago he was fully prepared to kick Hero Core's ass, but as he studied Yaoyorozu's demeanor intensively, he could understand why. She looked so similar to how he used to be. Fake confidence oozing out of every pore of her body, a determined look resigned on her face, though Izuku knew her brain was running a mile a minute. The buzzer blared around them, snapping Izuku out of the ongoing internal crisis. Wait. In his mind, it's being decided on the fly. Izuku thought as he tentatively took a few steps backwards. He readied his body in a position that would let him move at any given second, his feet a considerable distance apart in an attempt to find balance through his shaking nerves. Before getting a moment to think, Izuku noticed the signature sparkle of Yaoyorozu's quirk, which only meant one thing. She wasn't going to hesitate. She's most likely going to act recklessly since she seems to doubt her current ability, which then leads to the conclusion that her strategy must be pure instinct. Izuku grimaced as he considered his two choices. He really didn't like being put in a situation like this. He aspired to save, not shatter the confidence of others. Yaoyorozu's arm continued to glow as her right hand balled into a determined fist. It's now or never. Without another second of hesitation, Izuku leapt forward, his body shooting off at a right angle towards Yaoyorozu. Surprise flashed through her glossy eyes as she noticed Izuku's sudden advance towards her, and she quickly looked down at her arm in a fruitless attempt to urge whatever she was creating to form faster. "Midoriya's off with a flash! What kind of plans does this young fighter have against a powerful hero course student? Are we going to witness a similar fate to Monoma?" Present Mike declared, both of his hands gripping the announcement mic in anticipation. His students always seemed to leave him on the edge of his seat. To his right, Shota sat in a matching chair, sporting his typical deadpan expression. Though by the way he was subtly gripping the seat handle, Present Mike had the feeling he was just as much on edge. Izuku stopped his lunge after he successfully launched himself directly behind Yaoyorozu, ready to kick her legs out from under her and drag her to the border. It was a simple plan in hindsight, one almost akin to how Yaoyorozu herself took out her previous opponent, Kirishima. Before he could, however, Yaoyorozu whipped her body around to follow Izuku, making him leap backwards to dodge her sporadic fist flying towards his face. Her arm continued to glow as he landed a few feet away with a thump. He bounced on his balls of his feet momentarily as he contemplated his next move, noticing how Yaoyorozu's face slowly started to get more agitated. He ran at her again as he prepared to reach for her arm, hoping that the strength of his grip would seize her current creations. As his outstretched hand made contact with her left arm, he swiftly twisted it in a similar motion he used with Monoma, avoiding conversation altogether as his impromptu plan. So he opted for a quick takedown to get the job done rather than trying to play with her mentally. At least that was his plan until he heard the faintest of clicks echo near the vicinity of his arms. He looked down quickly as he and Yaoyorozu fell to the floor, his one arm gripping her wrists and the other was handcuffed through his goddamn pants. He tugged experimentally and realized that the only way to break free would be to rip through the waistband. The one cuff was locked on tightly to his wrist, and Izuku swore he could feel the metal digging into his skin. The other poked a hole through the fabric under his waistband and was folded up over the waistband to lock in place. He was essentially tied to his own pants. with the only way to freedom being to rip the band or take his pants off.
What's this? It looks like Yaoyorozu used a pair of handcuffs she created to restrain Midoriya. Bet no one saw that one coming, not even you, Eraserhead.
President Mike said, his voice unable to hide the shock he was experiencing.
Given that she had almost nothing to handcuff him to, I can admit that it was a creative idea.
Eraserhead commented soon after. He wasn't sure how she was able to not only handcuff his wrist, but also send a single strand through his pants to essentially tie him to his own body. But he was too pissed off to be impressed. This was his only pair of gym clothes. God damn it! Handcuffs? Seriously? Too scared to throw an actual punch that you relied on tying my arm down? Izuku asked, exasperation seeping through his complaints as he tightened his grip on Yaoyorozu. He didn't typically like to sound this mean, but these would cost a fortune to replace, and it's not like he had the money for it. Yaoyorozu huffed under the pressure Izuku's body was placing on her as he attempted to keep her from moving too much. You needed to be restrained given your current abilities. I only did what I needed to do, she replied confidently, though Izuku saw through the facade and noticed the glint of worry loitering in her eyes. Agitation got the better of him after getting partially restrained, something that often made him panic if it got too bad, which led him to scoffing at her attempt at a combat. This wouldn't be the first time I fought with one hand, he mumbled under his breath. Shit-talking it was. Like Kirishima, right? Knew you weren't strong enough to take him on, so you resorted to dirty tricks to get by? Cowardly for a hero student, if you ask me. He taunted, hoping to any deity that it would be enough to gauge a reaction out of her. A bit harsh, yeah, but now he had a hole to stitch up later, which he was not looking forward to. Yaoyorozu, as predicted, froze at his choice of words, likely getting whiplash considering how he acted when they met in the tunnel. Before she could react, however, Izuku sprinted towards the border of the arena, using his one arm to drag her across the dirt. At least I won't be the only one with a messed up uniform, he supposed. As they got closer to the border, Yaoyorozu seemed to snap out of the daze she was in and tried squirming her way out of Izuku's iron hold. Unfortunately for her, Monoma wasn't wrong about his insane grip. Suddenly feeling grateful for the number of villains Izuku had to tie up with one hand, whether the other one was injured or preoccupied with something else, he mustered up his strength to hoist Yaoyorozu off the ground and throw her out of the arena. He doubted he was able to throw her over his shoulder in their current position, so he threw her on her side instead, her elbow being the first to land on the concrete outside of the designated fighting space. The first match of round 2 is over, with Izuku Midoriya as the winner, Midnight announced cheerfully. The crowd roared as huffs racked through his body, his hands shaking at the realization that he made it to another round. He beat another hero student. As he looked around the dirt-filled arena, noticing almost no changes to the field, he realized that he had almost nothing to show for it. The matches just keep getting more pathetic, he thought to himself as he considered how lame his fights were compared to the others so far. He swallowed the doubt down, though, remembering that he still had stuff to do before he could feel bad about himself. He looked over at Yaoyorozu, who was slowly getting off the ground, and reached his hands out to her on instinct. She looked at him hesitantly before she accepted the gesture and pulled herself off the ground. They shook hands and both proceeded towards the same tunnel as Midnight and Cementos prepared for the next match.
I'm sorry, by the way,
Izuku said to Yaoyorozu as he scratched the back of his neck. His other hand twitched anxiously as he waited silently for a response. For not only beating you, but for what I said too. I didn't mean it. Yaoyorozu smiled weakly as she turned her head to face Izuku. You're forgiven, though I can't fully disagree with you either. I acted cowardly in order to win my round, and not in the way a hero should, she said grimly, her face contouring into a frustrated expression. I just wish I wasn't so weak. Weak, a word Izuku had heard all his life, from many different people for various reasons. Before gaining his current build, Izuku was obviously the weakest in his year. He struggled with the fitness tests and couldn't lift as much as the other boys. He could barely throw a punch, for God's sake, and of course nobody let him forget it. He never knew there were so many synonyms for that word until he entered his second year of middle school. He knew how Yaoyorozu felt. The notion of being so powerless at the hands of another, knowing you were outmatched yet still having to fight anyway. It was a feeling he hoped to forget, but he couldn't ignore how this pushed down his emotions boiled to the surface when he saw someone experience it right in front of him. You're not weak, Yaoyorozu. I just have more experience in combat, which isn't entirely your fault. Izuku replied, his voice surprisingly steady and much sweeter than how it was in the arena. They were both fully in the tunnel now, and the only light being the sun rays that beamed in from the outside arena. They walked in silence for a bit, eventually passing Iida as he went off to his match, with the latter giving a firm wave as he strided past them. Yaoyorozu gave him a weak wave, while Izuku opted for a small smile. He wasn't sure how pissed off her classmate would be, considering he was a bit harsher than necessary with the whole ordeal. As the silence continued to hang above them, looming like a thick cloud of fog, Izuku could feel himself becoming more antsy. Awkward silence was one of his most hated things, especially when he was the reason for it. How he survived standing near a criminal he captured while waiting for the cops to arrive was beyond him, but hey, at least he didn't tie her up. After not being able to bear the deafening silence a moment later, Izuku finally blurted, so if you wanted, I could give you a quirk analysis to help boost your power, along with a few points on fighting techniques. It's the least I could do, he thought, to make up for ruining her day already withering confidence. He raised a glance at her and noticed how her eyebrows scrunched ever so slightly, obvious confusion written through her features. Izuku tensed his shoulders, wondering if he had blown any chance at making amends. Only if you're okay with it, that is. Only if you're okay with it, that is. Think of it as an apology, he added a moment later. Following his statement, Yaoyorozu smiled lightly, seemingly more entertained than anything. Izuku let his shoulders droop, following a sigh of relief. A quirk analysis, you say? She asked, focusing her gaze towards Izuku. Yeah, I like to do them in my spare time, and I've been told they're not bad. So I figured you'd benefit from one, considering you're in the hero course and all, Izuku said, rubbing the back of his neck, suddenly feeling flustered by the revelation of one of his more embarrassing hobbies. I think I'll take you up on that sometime, Yorozu replied, her brown eyes lighting up the slightest bit. They were finally at the entrance that would take them back to the stands, leaving Izuku wondering how much time had actually passed. "I'll see you around then. Thank you, Midoriya," Yorozu said, smiling one more time as she walked away with a wave. "Well, at least she didn't hate me," Izuku reasoned. He made his way back to his seat next to Monoma and Shinzo, who were as always heavily interested in the scene in front of them. However, their gazes seemed to be much more focused than on an object situated in Shinzo's lap. Izuku walked over and stood behind them, placing his hands on his hips in mockery of a confrontational parent. His vigilante skills came in handy, as he was able to see what they were doing without them sensing his presence. As he peered over their shoulder, he recognized the familiar notebook splayed out on Shinzo's lap. "You must admit, he's quite impressive," Monoma mumbled to Shinzo, who nodded briefly as he flipped the page. "Yeah, can't believe how much detail is put into each one of these, not to mention the drawings. I wonder why he hasn't shown these to anyone." Shinzo replied, running his index finger across some of the writing. Izuku almost felt flattered by their compliments, but it was soon replaced with fear when he remembered the long lists of criminals in his analysis book. If they saw those, he wasn't sure how he'd be able to explain his way out of that one. "What are you guys doing?" Izuku asked, finally making his presence known to the duo. If he wasn't as worried about his notes, he would have laughed at how they both jumped at his voice. "Midoriya, hey, sorry, we were just looking through your notebook, that's all. We didn't mean to snoop, I swear," Shinzo said, closing the notebook with both of his hands. "What he said, it just fell to the ground and we couldn't help but notice the notes," Monoma added while he nodded vigorously. "Am I really that scary?" "Guys, I'm not upset," Izuku laughed. It's just that I have some pretty detailed notes in there and thought you might be weirded out." Izuku rounded the line of seats in the row to sit between them, where his notebook was previously sitting, before it fell into the grasp of Shinzo and Monoma. "Never! These are very thorough and well done. I applaud you," Monoma replied, turning his head to face Izuku. "Thanks. I've never gotten this reaction before, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around it," Izuku said, scratching his head as he looked back and forth between the two boys. "They were probably all assholes anyway," Shinzo scoffed as he handed the closed notebook back to its rightful owner. "Oh, Midoriya, I am curious about something though. There are a lot of people we didn't recognize in your notebook, and maybe it isn't our place to pry, but we were wondering how you knew them all." "Well, shit. He should have expected this, damn it, but of course the moment he lets his guard down, he makes a mistake. He didn't blame Shinzo or Monoma, he couldn't, not after not how accepting they were. But it was his own foolishness that put him there, and there was no way he could logically get out of this." An explosion rattled the arena before he had even a chance to open his mouth. How was this festival saved his ass so many times? "Wait a minute, isn't it Todoroki and Iida's fight? Why are there explosions?" Izuku asked, standing up to get a better view of the scene in front of him. "Nah, that fight ended right before you got here," Shinzo replied. "Todoroki immobilized Iida before he could be dragged out of bounds by freezing his engine." "It was quite sad," Monoma added with a slight smirk, forming on his face. If he wasn't in Class A, I would have felt worse for him. You're joking. I missed Todoroki's second fight. How can I face him without proper planning? Izuku exclaimed, falling back down in his chair dramatically. There was no way he would be able to beat Endeavor's son without analyzing his abilities beforehand. Relax, Midoriya. I doubt this is your first time going up against an opponent without knowledge about them, Shinzo supplied, trying his best to make Izuku feel better. Izuku sighed and slid down his chair as the other two watched him with an amused smile. No, it's not, he grumbled. But still, have you seen his attacks? How can anyone compete with that? I'm sure whatever your quirk is, it can give you some leverage, right? He doesn't seem to know what it is. Shinzo suggested, pointing his right hand in the air, something Izuku noticed he liked to do when he voiced his ideas. My quirk? Izuku mumbled. That just gave me an idea. Thanks, Thanks, Shinzo! He smiled as he sat back up in his seat. Any time, he replied, smiling back. So, Kachan and Ashido are fighting now, then? Izuku asked, shifting his gaze back onto the match in front of him. Things were getting interesting. Kachan was talented in everything to do with combat, but Ashido showed a lot of potential in her last match as well. From the looks of it, yes, Monoma replied, his attention now also focusing back on the match. Now Izuku managed to get away with avoiding their questions. He would never know. I hope the pink one wins, just so that the gremlin of Class 1A isn't victorious. The things I'd give to see that cocky grin fall off his face, Monoma said casually. If it wasn't obvious to Izuku already, he seemed to have a personal vendetta against the blonde. Yeah, Kachan tends to leave impressions like that. Izuku chuckled. If he didn't have such a temper, he probably would have been a somewhat likable person. But alas, his childhood friend had anger issues like no other. You knew him before this? Shinzo asked, his eyes leaving the ongoing match to focus back on Izuku. Yeah, actually, we've been going to the same school since preschool, so I've known him basically all my life, Izuku replied bashfully. He only had a handful of fond memories with the blonde, but not even those were enough to drown out Kachan's current behavior. You knew him since you were a toddler? How I pity your childhood, Monoma added. Moments from middle school flashed through Izuku's head, and he couldn't completely disagree with him. He wasn't always like that, though. Things were different before his quirk manifested, Izuku said, his eyes drifted back to the match. The only thing that hasn't changed about him is how amazing he is with his quirk. As the match continued, Izuku noticed Kachan start to close in on Ashido. She was able to keep distance from him due to her long-distance acid attacks, and since Kachan had not yet managed to master any solid long-range explosions, he wouldn't blast her away from a distance. Kachan continued his path towards Ashido, his explosions destroying the acid flying at him before it had a chance to land. They were slowly approaching the border, and unless Ashido started playing offense, she'd soon be backed into a corner. This match is probably going to end in the next few minutes. Shinzo? Izuku said, turning his body to face his friend. You might want to start heading down now. I'll follow you right after this match is done so I can watch you from the tunnel, okay?
Crap, you're right. I really don't want to run there again. I'll catch you two later.
Shinzo replied as he jumped up from his seat and started walking towards the exit. Good luck out there! And remember what we talked about! Izuku called as he watched Shinzo leave through the glass sliding doors, waving his hand at the side of his head in acknowledgement of his reminder. Izuku focused his attention back on the match. He noticed that they were nearing the border. Ashido sprayed her acid along the ground, making it difficult for Kachan to get close to her. Whether he was that much better and she knew it, or she was just intimidated to take him head on, Izuku couldn't tell. In her defense, however, it was quite difficult to get close to the blonde, as he almost always had his blind spots covered. As Kachan almost completely closed in on Ashido, he noticed her posture change again. He recognized almost immediately what she was doing. Her stance was similar to what she did in her previous match, which led Izuku to only one conclusion. It was about to turn into a slip and slide. In one foul swoop, Ashido slid her onto her side and glided through her slippery acid. Right as she passed Kachan, she sprayed the liquid up at him, attacking him at an angle Izuku doubted he was expecting. Kachan brought his arms up to shield his face from the impending blow, and right as he did so, Ashido leaned her body weight onto her forearms and used her legs to sweep Kachan off his feet. Kachan fell to the ground with a thump, but before she could land another successful hit onto his stomach, he launched a set of explosions towards her. As Ashido tried to flee from the lethal explosions, Kachan took the opportunity to attack and pinned her wrists to the ground, his right leg resting on the back of her knees. The buzzer rang loudly throughout the arena, which was followed by Midnight's announcement of Kachan's victory.
Oh man! Too bad Ashido didn't win. I was rooting for her.
Present Mike said sadly, which stirred a light chuckle from Izuku. His teacher really had no filter.
Shouldn't you be unbiased as a commentator?
Eraserhead asked right after, sounding bored out of his mind. Though Izuku knew he was secretly enjoying it. He was so asking him about them later.
Makes the event more interesting that way,
Present Mike countered enthusiastically. It'll take a few minutes for them to clean up Ashido's acid off the ground, so I'm going to head down now, Izuku said to Monoma as he got up from his seat, picking up his notebook in the process. Watch my notebook for me again, okay? Even after we snooped through it? Monoma asked, a mixture of confusion and curiosity blended onto his face. Izuku nodded, sticking out his notebook like an offering. Yeah, I don't really mind too much. It's not like you intentionally did it, and I'm just glad someone thinks it's cool. Izuku replied. And yeah, maybe he should have felt more upset about their breach of privacy, but it's not like they found one of his personal ones. Plus, he was able to get out of their questions, so it wasn't the end of the world. He'd much rather someone fawn over it than destroy it because they thought it was weird. Very well then, Monoma said, reaching his hands towards Izuku to accept the notebook being presented to him. Kick another Class 1A's ass for me, will ya? He added, smirking in his typical manner. I'll try my best, he replied, smiling back as he continued his walk towards the tunnel, fists tightening ever so slightly. As he slowly started to approach the tunnel, he felt his stomach start to churn. He wasn't feeling too confident about this match, contrary to how he was acting in front of Shinzo and Monoma. He wasn't lying when he said he had a few ideas in mind to take the upper hand, but that didn't change the facts about the match. He was quirkless, and with his only skills being things he picked up as a vigilante. Todoroki had not one but two abilities at his disposal, even if he didn't seem to use one of them, but still he had double the power Izuku did with the proper training from his father to match. He'd need a miracle to actually pull it off, and in Izuku's experience, those were 1 in a million. Damn it! He mumbled as he kicked a rock down the hallway and watched it roll along the length of the floor. His plan was never going to work. As he turned the corner, passing by an empty stairwell, he noticed a figure climbing down the stairs. He turned his head slightly, curious to see who it was, only to see the red, fiery shoes of a recognizable pro hero. Out of everyone, there was no way he was running into him right now.
Ah, Midoriya, correct. Impressive performance in your last 2 matches,
Endeavor said as he stood at the bottom of the stairs with his arms crossed. Thank you, sir, Izuku managed to say, his posture straightening like a wooden board. There weren't a lot of people Izuku found intimidating, but the Todoroki family seemed to be exempt from that list.
You're fighting against my son, Shoto, in the next match, and I have a request for you,
Endeavor said right after his voice booming through the hallway. And that is? Izuku asked, his arms crossing over his chest to mirror Endeavor's stance.
Don't hold back against my son. He's going through a rebellious phase right now, but I want you to make him utilize his full power and realize who he's meant to be.
Endeavor answered, his voice lowering yet firm. The subtle kind of scary, Izuku thought. Wasn't planning on it, Izuku said as he began to walk away. But before he completely left the area, he turned to face the pro hero one more time, not fully understanding what had suddenly come over him. Maybe it was his conversation with Todoroki earlier that sparked this shift, or something else entirely. But it wasn't something to think about right now. Todoroki may be your son who's succeeding you, but that doesn't mean that he is you. Who he's meant to be is up to him and him alone. Before he could get a proper response, he continued his walk down the corridor in hopes of kicking himself out of his pitiful mindset. By the time he made it to the tunnel, Shinzo's match had begun. The horn blared loudly and Shinzo was off in a flash. At lunch, they discussed using his quirk as little as possible, at least until he got to the final rounds. Once people knew what his power was, they could stop themselves from falling for it while also taking Shinzo down in the process. The only way to avoid that would be to rely on hand-to-hand combat until it was absolutely necessary. But considering some of the opponents, Izuku quickly realized that it wouldn't last long. Shinzo made his way towards Shiosaki at a record pace, making Izuku smile with pride at how much he progressed during their training. Shiosaki shot her vines towards him, her green hair dragging across the ground like water snakes swimming through the water. Shinzo, to his credit, dodged them not so gracefully. He hopped back and forth on each leg as the vines tried to grasp his ankles, and he waved his arms in the air in an attempt to keep his balance. A sudden swarm approached him simultaneously, but before Izuku could watch him become enclosed in the nest of vines, he heard Shinzo shout, "You're a girl with the killer personality, right?" "How?" was the only word Shiozaki could manage before she fell under Shinzo's brainwashing quirk. Her whines stopped midair, finally retreating their relentless attacks towards Shinzo as they fell to the ground. Her eyes turned glossy white, an effect of Shinzo's quirk. Izuku suspected he'd have to ask him about the details later. Shinzo huffed as he tried to catch his breath from his previous game of Dodge the Lasso.
Good. Now walk outside the border to end this match,
he said between huffs and coughs. Yeah, a routine upgrade was definitely needed. As Shiozaki slowly started to make her way towards the edge of the border, the chatter in the arena slowly started to grow.
Hey now, what's going on here? Is Shiozaki just giving up all of a sudden?
Present Mike asked aloud, though Izuku knew it was likely just for show, considering he already knew what their quirks were. The crowd continued to pick up as Shiozaki gradually got closer and closer to the border. Yells of confusion and encouragement rattled amongst the crowd, as nobody had seen Shinzo unleash his quirk before this moment. Izuku's biggest fear, however, was that they would see him as some sort of villain for using his quirk, which was often seen as non-heroic. The minute Shiozaki's foot stepped outside the boundary, the buzzer rang, indicating Shinzo's victory. A moment later, Shiozaki startled forward, likely signaling that she was out of the spell Shinzo had put her under. She walked back to shake her hands with him before they went their separate ways, and before he knew it, Izuku was congratulating Shinzo on his second win of the afternoon.
Sorry, I used my quirk so early on. I know it wasn't really in your plan.
Shinzo apologized as he noticed Izuku waiting for him in the tunnel. I understand that you had to. Shiozaki is a fierce opponent. We'll just have to craft up a new strategy for the next round, that's all. Izuku encouraged, his eyes lighting up at the chance to create new strategies.
Good luck against Todoroki. He's a tough one,
Shinzo said as he patted Izuku on the back lightheartedly. He is, which is why you should be grateful I'm fighting him for now, so you don't have to face him. Izuku teased, his grin growing wider on his face.
Yeah. Save that until after you win, tough guy,
Shinzo replied, laughing lightly. See you in the finals, Shinzo, Izuku said as he walked towards the arena.
Can't wait to kick your ass on live television,
Shinzo called, his hands cupping his mouth like Izuku wouldn't hear him otherwise.
And now, to start off round 3, we have Izuku Midoriya and Shoto Todoroki!
Hello again, my lovelies. That was awesome. I'm so glad that Leah was able to update this glorious fic. Yes, all the fics I read are glorious. I'm sorry, but they're so cool, and I wish I could write that well, okay? Anyway, first of all, I hope you were able to get better, Leah. Thank you so much for updating the story. And otherwise, I can't update anything else. I'm recording this on the 23rd of May, so I like to pre-record in bulk so I have an easier time. If I get a, what is it called? Oh yeah, an inspiration block, or like the ADHD paralysis. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Comment down if you have any feedbacks, any ideas for fan fictions I should read. I take from other fandoms as well. Request from other fandoms as well. And I really hope you're all doing okay. Stay safe, stay hydrated, take care of yourselves. Even if it's not water, drink at least something that contains 80% water. Alright? And don't forget to eat your veggies and balanced meals to help stay focused and energized. See you soon, read you soon, anything like that. So take care.